shall we? Dan Haggerty here. Hi, thank you for being with us. This is The Story, closing out the week with you on a beautiful Friday here in Portland, throughout Oregon, actually. So all the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook. We check our messages there. The fastest way, maybe using that hashtag #HeyDan on Twitter. Let's get started. Tonight's big story, a big surprise for people in 3 Portland neighborhoods. See, organized tiny house villages, big enough to fit 60 people, are moving in. Now, this is a done deal. Officials have already made their decision. Surprise. Shortly after they announced that decision, neighbors who live near these 3 sites started flooding our inbox. Here's Maggie Vespa.
That they're not talking to anybody, they're just doing it.
People in 3 Portland neighborhoods are grappling with a big decision made for them. City officials announced Thursday amid a mounting housing crisis, homeless villages are headed for 3 vacant lots, 2 in southeast Portland and 1 downtown. Each Safe Rest village will house roughly 60 people. The city aims to have them up and running by 2022.
Safe Rest villages are fenced, fully staffed, 24/7 managed outdoor shelters.
In other words, this is a done deal, whether neighbors want it or not.
That's stupid.
Jim Widener does not want it. He owns a home near one of the lots, a TriMet property at Southeast 122nd and Burnside. He's convinced crime will go up and property values will go down.
They're just dropping it in our laps and saying, deal with it. And it's putting a hardship on everybody.
Then there's this site along Southwest NATO near I-405. Just across the street sits the International School of Portland, an elementary school. A parent wrote to KGW she's beyond appalled and worries about kids' safety.
Honestly, it's not a really good idea.
This man, who didn't want to show his face, agrees. He's homeless and camps on the lot now.
It's a safety hazard, especially bringing kids into the mix next to a village of homeless people that are possibly using.
City officials have said the villages will be carefully managed. The people in them referred by nonprofits. Still, Friday, KGW heard concerns and fears about all 3 sites, including this 3rd one at Southeast 45th and Harney. So we took these fears to people with lived experience.
Well, you live next to a village that the city endorsed.
Cameron Morgan lives about a block from the Kenton Women's Village in North Portland's Kenton neighborhood. It's housed homeless women since 2017.
You know, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing.
Morgan says the village itself has always been peaceful, but in the last couple years, crime and camping around it have gotten worse. He hesitates, though, to place any blame on the village itself.
Since the authorities cannot police and take care of the homelessness problem and transients, that I think that's a negative part of it.
Morgan adds his property's value has not gone down, but multiple neighbors are moving, not from the neighborhood, but from Portland, where crime and homelessness are spiking citywide.
Now, we did reach out to Catholic Charities, which runs the Kenton Women's Village, and we just haven't yet heard back.
I'd like to stay with the comparison that was made for just one moment, because
Sure.
you spoke to a neighbor, but it was just one neighbor. You also talked to the neighborhood association.
Exactly, I did. I actually talked on Zoom to Vice Chair Tyler Roppy, and his take was, similar to Morgan's. Overall, neighbors, he says, support the village, and he also said property values have not gone down, but he noted crime has gone up, again noting that's in line with the rest of the city. So hesitating to blame that on the village. That said, in regards to these new villages, he made this distinction.
The Kenton Women's Village was a fairly unique experience in that the neighborhood had an opportunity to tell the city to move forward or not. And through that process, and I'd consider it fairly grassroots, it gave neighbors a real sense of ownership over the project. But the Safe Rest Villages is not a grassroots community-driven process. It's more of, okay, we've selected a site, here's where it is, here's what we're going to do. In addition, you have also a scenario where they're trying to do this quickly and acting like it's going to be easy, and I think it's going to be harder than people think.
Now, we should note and remind people more villages are coming. This isn't the end.
Yeah, exactly. The city has said they want to open 6 total by 2022, so they say they'll announce the other 3 locations as soon as possible.
Maggie, thank you.
Sure.
Now, last week, we told you about how the city was considering the Expo Center as a site for homeless people living in their cars and RVs. That 50-acre property is owned by Metro, and you can see there lots of parking lot space. Well, now we're getting a bit of an update on that plan. Is it coming along? Laurel Porter asked Commissioner Dan Ryan about it on this week's Straight Talk.
That's been delayed. We've been in communication with Metro since February, many conversations. They have an 11-acre parking lot, and we weren't offered any of the paved parking lot. We were offered a grassy ditch area that's off the parking lot. And unfortunately, that would take $1.5 million to redevelop that space. So we're hoping that Metro will stay at the table and offer something that we could put together.
Okay, so it's still a work in progress. We asked Metro, too, about all this, and they told us what you see on the screen. Quote, "We are continuing our conversations about use of the lower gravel lot on the southwest side of the Expo Center campus for a safe park village. Many of the parking lots at the Expo property already have contractual obligations related to the center's $54 million in economic impact in Greater Portland. The area we offered would need some infrastructure improvements, but could serve as many as 50 RVs. So it sounds like we're going to have to keep an eye on this one, let you know what actually does happen or what we see happen on that property. I should mention Vancouver already has a place like this at the C-Tran Evergreen Transit Center. There are more than 50 cars and trailers and RVs parked there right now, with about 70 adults living there and 10 kids living there. The city is also, Vancouver, looking for a second site just like it. Beaverton, they also have the Safe Parking Program, which is a partnership with a nonprofit called Just Compassion. And they let people park at different sites throughout the city, mostly churches and public land. Now, here is a story that a lot of you have been talking about, not just to us, I'm sure, to your family and friends. All right, this is definitely what they call a talker in the news business. Dozens of unvaccinated legacy workers protested the COVID vaccine mandate today. See, nearly 800 people were placed on unpaid leave today because they won't get the shot. Governor Brown mandated, as you remember, all healthcare workers that they have to be vaccinated by the middle of October. But every healthcare system kind of has their own timeline, and you're seeing legacies play out. Many of these workers filed for religious exemptions, but they were denied. And a lot of you were asking us during Kristen's first story on this yesterday, how the religious exemption process plays out. How does that work exactly? And how can an employer deny someone's claim? Here's Kristen Severance.
I knew we'd get so many comments and questions after our story on the unvaccinated legacy workers being put on leave, and the story viewers did not disappoint. We read all of your messages, like this one from Greg. So he emailed saying, "So I really wanted Kristen to ask the religious exemption person if he has had any other vaccinations." Greg said religious objectors need to be consistent in their beliefs. Thank you, Greg, for the email. So he's talking about my interview with a certified nursing assistant at Legacy, Joseph Steiniger. Steiniger works at Legacy Meridian Hospital in Tualatin. He filed a religious exemption instead of getting the COVID vaccine, saying it goes against his beliefs as a Christian. I asked Joseph if he's received any vaccine in his life. He said yes, he has gotten the flu shot, but then his beliefs on vaccines changed.
And that was when I started making a lot of life changes and trying to eat more organic and not genetically modified stuff, and avoiding a lot of different toxins, and got rid of a lot of cleaners.
You know, I've talked to several healthcare workers basically losing their jobs over this, willing to walk away. Many of them tell me the same thing. They say they have a right to change their minds, change their beliefs and religious views, and that their exemptions should not be denied because they have not felt this way their whole lives.
How do you prove that this is somehow religious and not just how you feel inside?
Well, in Romans, it talks about not eating anything that goes against your conscience. And that would be similar to injecting something into your body.
You hear that a lot when it comes to people filling out religious exemption forms. They say it, quote, goes against my conscience. But is that enough to prove that their beliefs are, quote, sincere? I asked Jim Oleski, a professor of law at Lewis and Clark Law School.
Well, the company certainly would get in trouble if they tried to tell the employee what is and is not a legitimate religious belief. If they did that, they'd get in a lot of trouble. But they are allowed to, and the government is allowed to, in cases involving exemptions from government rules, determine sincerity, because otherwise you can imagine the problem. If anybody could claim that they objected to any rule for religious reasons and government couldn't test it.
Oleski also told me the scripture being used on many of those exemption forms doesn't seem to be specific enough to hold up in court.
And at least some of the examples you gave me of reasons employees gave for objecting weren't specific to COVID-19. They were references to a religious belief that they shouldn't do anything that they think is wrong. Well, again, if someone's belief is that general, then it would be impossible to enforce rules.
We also talked to Steve Green, a law professor at Willamette University. He said employers have every right to ask if something an employee believes is in fact backed up in some way.
But still, you need to show there's some basis so the employer can at least respond to this, right? And so consequently, I could see a situation, and I know there's a situation, I think, at Legacy Hospital, where a claimant was rejected because they were not opposed to vaccinations per se.
And while employees and the Oregon Nurses Association said that Legacy did, quote, blanket rejections, meaning they just rejected every single medical exemption, Legacy told me that is not the case. They said a panel went over every exemption request form before it was denied. All of these unvaccinated employees will be placed on leave, but Legacy told me those workers have until October 18th to get even one shot, and they can still keep their jobs. Do you have questions? I know you have comments. Let us know. All you have to do is use that hashtag, HeyDan.
Okay, thanks to Kristen. Let's count some vaccines like we do every night. More than 2.8 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. That's 66.6% of the state's entire population. That includes everyone, even kids under 12 who can't get the vaccine yet. In Washington, more than 5.1 million people have gotten at least their first dose. That works out to be 67.3% of the state's entire population, including kids. Now, over the past 10 years, Oregon's Latino population has grown quickly in big cities, in rural towns, pretty much everywhere, reshaping our state. Oregon's overall population grew by around 11% over the last decade, while the Latino population grew by 31%. Morgan Romero introduces you to some of the new faces of this new Latino landscape.
The 2020 census shows there are nearly 140,000 more Latinos in the state of Oregon compared to 2010, now making up 14% of the population. Some came from other states, some from other countries. They call Oregon home because of job and educational opportunities and family connections. Most of the state's Latinos still live in bigger metro areas, Washington, Multnomah, and Marion counties. The vast majority are Mexican American, but experts say we're seeing more Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, and South Americans. Martina Bialik, born and raised in Argentina and Mexico, moved to Forest Grove 4 years ago for love. She met her Oregonian husband abroad, and he wanted to be closer to the woods and family.
When I first came in here, I thought that it was a very homogenous place. At first, it was really hard for me to find community.
Now, she surrounds herself with a big community of Latinos, and she's fallen in love with Oregon's beauty.
Where I come from, there aren't really that many opportunities to go hiking or going camping just because it's dangerous.
Martina works at nonprofit Latino Network, where Carolina Chiari started 5 months ago. She followed her partner here, but Carolina quickly came to appreciate Portland.
I think it's really accessible for young Latinos.
Born in Panama, she moved to Florida as a toddler for her dad's job. The first-generation American is also a first-generation college grad.
We really kind of kept the culture and the traditions present in our home. So I've always felt connected.
Also a first-generation American, Maria Hinojos Presi's parents migrated from Mexico in the 80s, chasing the American dream, prosperity, and stability. When she got pregnant, Maria found her way to Oregon, chasing a similar life for her baby.
It was that desire for safer, better, more prosperous. And my husband's originally from Eugene.
She's making a name for herself in Marion County through her work with PCUN, the largest Latino union in the state, and now as a member of the Salem-Keizer School Board.
There's like a strong movement to want, action on climate change and equity and for our schools and literally leaving this place better for our kids.
East of the mountains, rural Morrow, Malheur, and Hood River counties have the biggest share of Latinos.
If there's already family connections of families and friends, it's easier to go find a place that there was a lot of job growth in those counties over the last few decades. Those counties all have a lot of agricultural processing plants and distribution and warehousing.
Well, the family that moved first created an environment for the next group to move in.
4 decades ago, Marco Benavides got a scholarship to study agriculture in Hood River, a world away from his home in Santiago, Chile.
After that, my family was in the process of trying to get out of the country. The political, socioeconomic situation was real bad. I told them, well, I came from Oregon, and it's a good place.
With the biggest jumps in their Latino populations over the last 10 years were Wallowa, Benton, and Columbia counties. Latinos now account for almost a quarter of all Oregonians under 18.
The Latino population in Oregon is a very young population, very few elderly. Year after year, we expect more births than deaths among people identifying as Latino.
Young Latinos, like 22-year-old Cheriet Montoya Aguado, whose family left Colombia as the political and economic situation became more dire. She saw Oregon's lush landscape in a movie and thought it looked peaceful, the opposite of her home. Barely knowing English, she set out to get an education.
I see opportunities and my life is changed.
Supported by her family, teachers, and classmates, Cheriot graduated with her high school diploma 2 years ago. She's now enrolled at a community college in Salem. She volunteers and tries to give back.
And I just want to make something different of this community.
As more Latinos are born or settle in Oregon, we see a shift in demographics. Experts say we see more young Latinos enrolling in college and diversifying the workforce. We see a shift in policies and politics as more people of color influence decisions and challenge the status quo.
I see the power of my community.
We are thriving. We are influential. We are here to make a positive impact.
Morgan Romero, KGW News.
And Charles Ryerson with PSU's Population Research Center digs for census data for a living. Glad he's doing it. I don't really want to do that sort of thing. He said that Asian and Pacific Islander groups grew even faster than Latinos over the last decade, but they still aren't as large overall as Oregon's Latino population.
Clearly, people in Portland want to race their cars in the streets, but that's illegal. So why can't the people who race just go to the raceway we already have?
There's no way to do that without destroying the racetrack itself or the ground that you're doing it on.
When the story continues.
Welcome back. Thanks for all the people that email and write in throughout the show. I always go over during the commercial breaks and try to read through a few of them, look at some of the ones I might want to address at the end of the show. Keep sending them in. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com or use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. I also want to remind you about our Hey Help campaign. This week we're asking you to please consider donating to Street Roots. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them already. For those of you who are not, it is a non-profit weekly newspaper sold by people experiencing homelessness to help them earn an income. If you want to help them out, just open up the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code on your screen. It'll take you to a donation page where you can donate, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. We're calling this a micro donation drive. We do one every week. We know we can't continue to ask people to donate all types of money, so we're just asking people to give, something like a tip. Give $5, give $10, something like that. No matter how small, it still adds up and it can really, really help. Now, let's talk about Portland police. Their mission: crack down on street racing.
These events obstruct access for community members and emergency vehicles who seek the appropriate use of our public right-of-ways.
That's right, Mr. Mayor. So, how are they going to do it?
If you're asking for tactics, we're not going to talk about tactics today.
Okay. That's okay. That's fine. I get that. So let's not talk about how you're going to do it. Let's talk about getting it done. What about the results?
I'm happy to report that the mission was a resounding success.
Okay, I'll take that. So, you may have heard this. Police arrested more than a dozen people Sunday night in North Portland. They gave out tickets, they towed cars, they even found 2 guns. This appears to be the first big street racing bust by Portland police in a very long time, and about a month after the city council passed a new ordinance about street racing. Now, if you're caught organizing or participating in street racing or sliding or drifting or whatever the kids are calling it these days, you could get a $500 ticket. Your car could get towed. That's not cheap either. And in some cases, you could end up going to jail for 30 days. Although the city is offering some diversion programs there, they want to keep people out of a jail cell. And while it's not jail for everyone, police did say at least one kid probably got grounded.
I know I've heard of at least one parent who's pretty upset that their vehicle is in impound because their child or young adult decided to take it out. So I encourage parents to get involved as well, because these are realities. If we're enforcing these things, we are going to have vehicles in impound. People will be arrested. We do have a lot of younger people engaged in this. We'd rather not arrest them and take them to jail, and also, have them be charged with things like reckless endangerment and things that would lead to high fines or their license suspended.
No TV for a week, a lot of penalties for kids. What are they doing? That's crazy. So we wanted to get some more details. We're curious. All right, we want to know, how did police do this bust? More than a dozen people they rounded up. Did they surround the crowd with sirens blaring? Did they go in secret agent style and try and infiltrate and shut it down from within? They wouldn't tell us. They say they didn't want to reveal their tactics. I get it. It's okay. But they did say that they're going at this from a few different angles, and they're looking to address the root causes and finding solutions to that other than just throwing people into jail.
There is a cultural element to it. The culture is the car enthusiast culture, and there are safe ways to do that and safe places to do that. In the past, we've tried to develop strategies like offering PIR as a place where people can go and do Friday night race nights, and we put this out to the community, and unfortunately, what the street racing community is doing that is not working for those events is the drifting. And the drifting in itself is not only unsafe because you're driving a car in an uncontrolled method, but there's no way to do that without destroying the racetrack itself or the ground that you're doing it on. And so there's more impact than just the driving behavior. It impacts the actual infrastructure that you're doing it on.
Well, police acting, so we'll keep an eye on that as we have. The street racing issue has been a big complaint for a lot of different communities. Hey, keep sending in your questions and comments. We're about to wrap up the week here. It's almost through. Not yet, though. Talk after the break. Stick around. All right, I got a couple comments. Sean wrote in and said maybe we should fine the spectators of the street racing an additional $100. Yeah, I guess there are people there watching, right? But they're not the ones that are creating. I don't know. That's a tough question. Nobody's brought that up yet. You're the first one, Sean. I'll think about it. Ken writing in and said, hi, Dan, the vaccine issue, it's a religious exemption. You interviewed lawyers. How about interviewing ministers, spiritual leaders, and priests? I find that to be interesting. Yeah, I'd like to hear what they have to say, too. I agree with you on that one, Ken. But really, the reason we are interviewing lawyers is because this comes down to the way the law is interpreting these types of things. But you might be onto something. Maybe we'll ask around, see if somebody's willing to have that conversation with us. Now, before we go, it is a Friday. I want to talk about something really quick. We want to give a huge congratulations to our lead producer here on the story, Stephanie Villers, and her fiance, Michael. That's them on the screen right there. Steph has been staring at the clock all day, basically all week, actually, because she is headed away for 2 weeks to get married and celebrate with her family. Huge congratulations to them. If you're thinking of a gift for her and you play for the Seattle Mariners, just keep winning baseball games. That's all I'm saying. Here she is, the last time the team was as good as they are right now, rocking that Edgar Martinez uni. A trip to the playoffs, guys, would certainly be icing on the wedding cake for Stephanie. All right? Thank you for being with us tonight. Have yourself a great weekend. Stephanie, look, I mean, that is a cute pic. We'll see you guys on Monday.